I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Local news is in decline across the country. Montgomery County, Maryland has not escaped this national trend, but perhaps has been spared the worst of it because of two media companies, I think. Moco Show, the social media-driven local news platform, and Moco 360, which used to be known as the Bethesda Beat and is part of the Bethesda magazine group, and really is the publication of record in the county now. 2 years ago, Rockville-based developer Scott Copeland bought the Bethesda magazine group from its founder, Steve Hull. Copeland rebranded the online hard news site, Bethesda Beat, as Moco 360. I caught up with Copeland to talk about his business, his entry into the media market, and his politics. Who runs our local news media and how? What do they believe in? And what do they think is important?
Trying to make it work the way it used to. Trying to breathe a little life back into what we were. Trying not to hurt, doing the things we should do.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are dirty, messy, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from DC area Southern soul band King Soul. Tom Clifford and Jake Flack on vocals, Mark Noon on bass, Arif Durrani on keyboards, Ben Holmes on drums, Chris Watling on sax, Matt Ripetto on the tenor sax, and Vince McCool on the trumpet. You can find them at kingsoulband.com.
Any place we could get lost. 'Cause I found out what breaks my baby's heart. Though we both have paid the cost. Trying to make it work.
A couple of months ago, we did an episode called Can Incremental Change Fix Road Safety?, where we looked at Montgomery County's new Safe Streets Act. The County Council passed the law this week, and the County Executive signed it. The law prohibits right turn on red at certain intersections in the county. Unclear at this point how many intersections are actually covered. The law requires MCDOT, the County Department of Transportation, to do an infrastructure review when a pedestrian or bicyclist is hit by a driver near a school. But the boundaries of where this review must occur are drawn narrowly, that we expect fewer than 10 reviews in a year, even though half of all pedestrian and bicycle collisions, about 350 in a year, happen within half a mile from county schools. Lastly, The law requires the county executive to come up with an automated traffic enforcement plan. The county police has been working on expanding its network of traffic cameras for some time now. And here the caution is not to repeat the mistakes made by the school bus camera program, which State Delegate from District 20, David Moon, has called wrongful because of how and where tickets are issued. We got a voice letter about the episode on road safety, in which my guest, Miriam Schonbaum of the Action Committee for Transit, lamented over an inadequacy in county crash data that prevented the determination of the ages of the victim. But there seems to be a workaround.
Hi, this is Keith Campbell, Bethesda, with a comment on your July 14th podcast, Can Incremental Change Fix Road Safety? In the podcast, Ms. Schonbaum noted the importance of knowing the age of pedestrian crash victims. For example, when looking at crashes in school safety zones. Unfortunately, the county's public crash data lacks that information. However, the Maryland State Police provides another version of that data that does allow us to get that information. It includes the non-motorist crash victim's date of birth, so we can calculate their age. The data set also indicates which crashes occurred on state versus local roads, which is important for understanding which crashes MoCo's new Safe Streets Act can make a difference for. The Maryland State Police Crash Data Set is available online. Just Google Maryland State Police Crash Data Download. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. We love to hear from you when you like what we do on this show and when you think we have been remiss. It is easy to send us a voice letter, record on your phone, and email the file to producer@ihppod.org. The countdown to the federal government shutdown continues without any clear resolution in sight. The next few days and the weekend are going to be critical. Can Congress pull out a last-minute deal? Montgomery County this week banned the sale and use of gas-powered leaf blowers in the county. The ban on sale starts July 2024. The ban on use starts July 2025. Noisy gas-powered leaf blowers are a caricature of the excesses of suburban life in America. They pollute. They are largely unnecessary. Electric leaf blowers will continue to be allowed. They are less noisy and do not emit carbon where they are used. But depending on the energy mix in the electric grid, electric leaf blowers may not be entirely carbon innocent. To the extent possible, homeowners should allow leaves to mulch in place and help insect life thrive. Pathway, sidewalks, and sometimes grass have to be swept, but brooms and rakes can do plenty. The ban on leaf blowers will affect homeowners, but will have an even bigger effect on lawn maintenance businesses. They will have to change over their equipment before July 2025. DC, which banned gas-powered leaf blowers a few years ago, has had difficulty with enforcement. In a county as large as Montgomery, this will be an even bigger problem. On Twitter's Freedomist Corner, here is what they are saying. I'm still going to use my gas-powered leaf blower, and there is nothing you can do about it. You will have to sit still and take it. I have converted my gas-powered leaf blower into a flamethrower. Come get it. After the spat between Care First, the health insurance provider, and Johns Hopkins Medical Group, one of the region's largest medical service providers, that happened last year, 2022, there is now a new battlefield in the healthcare industry. Kaiser Permanente, which is one of the largest health management organizations in the DC area as well as in the country, is under threat of a strike as the company negotiates a new contract with its nearly 4,000 workers. 98% of Kaiser workers' union members voted for a strike if collective bargaining fails. The existing contract runs out early October, and the strike could come shortly thereafter. Better pay and staff shortages are at stake. A strike would halt operations at several Kaiser facilities in the area. Montgomery County's Office of Inspector General will investigate the Beidelman sexual harassment scandal in MCPS, both for the facts of the case and the process and pattern issues involved. This brings much-needed external eyes into MCPS. Up north in the fastest-growing county in Maryland, Frederick, Republican County Council member Steve McKay has called for a stop to all new housing developments in the county until the school crowding issues are addressed. Several years ago, in an effort to encourage development and attract priced-out families from Montgomery County, the Frederick County Board of Commissioners allowed development projects to move forward amidst school overcrowding by paying a special fee to offset the problem. According to McKay, the school overcrowding never did get better, so now it is time for a complete moratorium, he said. Several desirable parts of Montgomery County, including the city of Rockville, had or were close to getting housing moratoriums based on calculations in the adequate public facilities ordinances used by the county and the municipalities. And Montgomery County, just like Frederick today, was at the horns of a dilemma. Address the housing shortage or expand schools first. What remains unsaid in many of these debates is that not all schools in any jurisdiction are overcrowded at the same time. Some are, while others are under-enrolled. And the solution to that problem is cheaper than stopping all new building activity and letting home prices skyrocket. And it is also cheaper than building new schools. That solution is to change school attendance boundaries, shifting some students from overcrowded schools to under-enrolled schools. But typically, homeowners have resisted this practice, believing that their homes will lose value as a result. School boundary battles are legendary in local politics for their acrimony and vitriol. But not doing so is fiscally irresponsible and educationally inequitable. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with Scott Copeland, the new owner of Moco 360 and Bethesda magazine.
If I hadn't run late, so put this one down to a simple twist of fate. Need a little information, just a minute of your time. I need your name and your number, your zodiac sign.
Scott Copeland, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you very much for having me. Look forward to our conversation.
You have now owned Moco 360, previously known as Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat. for 2.5 years, I think. You come from a real estate background. How is the media business different from the real estate business?
It is very different. It's a really interesting challenge that I undertook. I'm not sure I knew exactly how challenging, in all candor, but it's definitely used different parts of my brain and has tapped into some new and very interesting and productive relationships, which I really cherish. But there are two different things within a different industry, but the print is completely different than that of the digital.
So what are these challenges specifically?
I bought it from Steve Hall, who you obviously know, and Steve and Susan started it as a magazine close to 20 years ago. And Steve was the center point of it, as was Susan on the administrative side. But Steve was the publisher, he was the editor, and everything kind of was around him. He literally sat in the middle of the office, and there was just activity all the time on all sides of the business. It was a really productive model for him. It worked very, very well. I didn't have that background nor desire, candidly, to do that. So we had a little bit of a shake off of new management, a new sort of approach to the business, a new style. And then we were charged with and challenged with hiring the new executive editor that was going to act in that capacity, which Steve was very instrumental in helping me find Ann Talent, who is our executive editor and edits both the magazine and MoCo 360. And she is terrific and, was really just a terrific addition, especially for me, not having any experience in that role. And then the final point on that is getting the reporter pool, which is critical to us on the MoCo 360 side. And the editors, which we have 2 designated editors now, right under Ann, and 5 reporters and before there was only 1 editor, and up to 5 reporters, depending on the time during Steve's tenure, and maintaining those relationships. And a lot of times they're with us for a little while. They get a lot of really good experience because they're putting out a lot of content every day. And then, they move on. There are other opportunities for them, often out of market, which has been the case with several of our reporters. But it's a challenge nonetheless, is to keep that reporter pool going and growing, by the way, not just maintaining, but trying to grow it as well. We're 5 reporters right now, covering a community of over 1 million people.
How many would you like to have?
So I just learned this the other day. The rule of thumb, which I don't know if I agree with, but the rule of thumb is a reporter per 20,000 residents in a community. That means we would have to have 50 reporters. I don't think that's exactly right.
Why don't you agree with that?
That's an almost impossible business model, candidly, to really, for true sustainability. I guess if money wasn't an issue, sure, why not?
One part of the business model of having 50 reporters is also that there's not the revenue to support it. Now, these reporters are getting following, they're getting reads, but you're not able to monetize it into revenue. We are really talking about sort of the limits of the local news market, right? How do you understand that?
We're the only ones doing this right now. I mean, there certainly are, bloggers and podcasters, such as yourself, that really do provide valuable information. But as far as, and the Washington Post will do a story every, 10 days or so, they're not the local, prevalence that they used to be, right?
They're not the local newspaper record anymore, and you are. But the revenue is not there. So
this is the model. While Bethesda Beat tied very well to the Bethesda magazine, it didn't represent all of Montgomery County. And so that's why MoCo 360 is not only a better name in terms of what our goals are, but it does incorporate in our culture, in our desire to serve all of the community as opposed to, what would be arguably just Bethesda. So currently the magazine is obviously is iconic for us, right? I mean, in this community, it's a staple for the community. And there's a loyal reader base, loyal advertiser base. It's important. We have great events, Bethesda, Women Who Inspire. We just had our first in-person event last week, was terrific. And so the opportunity for me at this point is for the proceeds and the profits and the opportunities created by that print advertising is to support what's going on the digital side and on the MoCo 360 side. And so while we are enhancing our brand and enhancing our events, enhancing our presence and our importance in the community, and therefore enhancing our revenue on the digital side as well. On the magazine side, while print is down everywhere, right? I mean, it just is. I do think there's a very long runway for print publication in a market like Bethesda. I don't think it's going away anytime soon, and we're working hard in print to make it a little bit more current, to bring in a younger demographic reader. And we have a great editorial team, focused on that, great freelance relationships, and keeping their finger on the pulse of the community. So
Bethesda Beat, even when I interviewed Steve in 2021, was still losing money. So the MoCo 360 side, the magazine was subsidizing the online, and it seems you are still doing the same thing.
Yeah, we're committed to doing that. I do think, though, with where we go, there's a pathway to neutrality. I don't want to use the word profitability, and that's not my goal here, by the way. I mean, obviously, it has to be sustainable and long-term viability financially. I can't fund it forever, but as we expand to coverage of the county, that opens up an enormous amount of opportunity for ad sales and other digital, presence on our website from other advertisers that candidly were, probably did not feel represented by Bethesda Beat or Bethesda Magazine for that matter.
So, I asked you the first question, which is, what is the difference between running real estate and running media? And I think you just did that. You don't have an expectation of profit, or you want break even rather than profitability.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm sure you will not accept that from your real estate deals.
No, and look, I'm lucky that's the case. When I bought the magazine, and Bethesda Beat, my focus was really on community building through the magazine, the vehicle of the magazine. What translated for me in my short ownership of this is the importance of this local journalism, and I'm a little bit of a geek about it now. I read about it all the time. And, you read about stories in the Midwest or in communities that have nobody reporting on anything.
You can just go to Garrett County and Cumberland in Western Maryland, and
you're right. You're right. And honestly, if we weren't doing this, we could say the same thing in Montgomery County. And, Montgomery County, look, all the stuff that is good about the county, there are challenges. We have to hold people accountable. We're spending $3.5 billion, $3.2 billion on our education budget.
Yeah, 3.2.
Yeah, 50% of our annual budget, which great investment into our future.
So, what did you follow in terms of local news before you bought the news?
Well, I would follow the local council members because I was always interested, in development for the most part, positions and where we were. And by the way, I don't have very many developments or projects in Montgomery County, not for any reason other than just circumstantial. And one of the projects that we have here is a nonprofit that my wife and I run that is not, it wouldn't qualify in terms of, of a typical development, because that too is not profit based.
I'm finding a theme here that you're like at a stage of life when, profit does not matter. I mean,
Well, we've had some unique opportunities in our lives and some unique challenges. And I think the opportunity to give a little bit back where we can. Montgomery County, it means a lot to us. My wife grew up here. I've been here since graduating from the University of Maryland a long time ago. I won't say how long ago, but a long time ago. We raised our 4 kids here. Currently, all 4 of them live here in the county. There 2 are actually technically living in DC, but they work in the county. And so it's an important place to us. And, we want to do what we can do.
well, with that bio, you can run for office now.
No, that's not happening. I don't want to do that. I want to leave that to the good to those guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
You changed the name of Bethesda Beat to be Moco 360 to both reach the county and the advertisers across the county. How much of that do you think you've done?
Oh, we've only put it. I mean, internally, we talk about it, all the time. And Ann Talent, our editor, is very conscientious that the county is expansive, and we do our very, very best. So we have a reporter now that'll do a report in both English and Spanish, for example.
Do you think your staff is now more representative today than it was in the past?
That's a great question. I think Steve did a great job in providing that diversity but I think we're a little bit better, but not by a lot. And I don't want to say that it wasn't from a lack of trying. It's very, very difficult. But we do have what I think is good representation on our team. And we consider that as we continue to grow. I'd love to see somebody that had some real tie to Silver Spring or tie to the Up County that could come in and provide sort of a head start on what the issues of the day are, or what really matters to those communities.
What about the leadership?
We are very lucky to have our chief operating officer is a woman named Jen Farkas, who has been with the magazine Bethesda Beat, Moco 360 for a very long time in a lot of different roles. She has a great knowledge of what's going on, and not only in our company, and she has that institutional knowledge, but also in what's going on in the community. And she is a real, fan of both magazine and local journalism. And so she's been very helpful in kind of keeping things moving day to day and heading in the right direction. And then on a completely separate and there's a real distinction between the business side, the operating side, and obviously the editorial side. And that is run by Ann Talent. And, I think her name is fitting. She's got a real talent for this stuff, a real talent. And she's passionate and she cares and she's conscientious and she is very committed to providing a really, really, really strong product, but really quality product. And she has high standards that mesh with mine. And I think really, move the needle and make a difference.
One of the things I noticed was that the company has tried to raise revenue is a membership model, like an NPR almost support model. Does that really work in a for-profit setting?
I've struggled with it, and I get it. In terms of the I'm a for-profit, and people look at the magazine and say, "Oh my God, look at all these ads. Copeland must be making a ton of money." And I get it. I'm very realistic about that, and I understand it. And I would invite them in to see our financials, and they would understand that it's not as great as they think because of the website. But I'm looking at that. The membership pieces to it are not as vibrant as I would like, but I also understand why that is the case, and what we have to figure that piece out and determine what the value is to the member and make sure that we are providing that value.
From your new vantage point now, what have you learned about politics?
I've learned a lot. And actually, I was a poli-sci major at University of Maryland. So yeah, it was great. And it was just an interest of mine.
I tell my students who are also political science majors that they will make a lot of money. Yes.
Yeah, they should go into real estate, right? Yeah, exactly. No, it was such a cool, and I took a lot of debate and classes like that I really enjoyed. Model UN like stuff that is just kind of just always interested me. And I worked on a handful of campaigns for people that have run for public office, and I found it really interesting, and that was on a local state legislature stuff. From a county standpoint, we did have some deals, development deals in Silver Spring that we converted some long vacated buildings, like 20 years vacated, and we converted them from offices to affordable housing. And those were in the days that Doug Duncan was a county executive. And so, it was a high priority for him, you may recall at that time, to revitalize Silver Spring. This was in South Silver Spring.
Right.
He was true to his word. He really kind of made things happen. And it sort of was a dovetail for me then, because I got to know a lot of people in and around this transaction that were in politics. And in that same area, we bought a parking lot and turned it into more affordable housing. And we bought the parking lot from the county. So there's this private-public partnership. And it really kind of, worked, and it excited me that we could do that. So it's always been an interest to me. And some of it was just because, I had these relationships and I needed those relationships. But since owning the magazine, it's a little different now. I think the biggest thing is that back then, I didn't necessarily see people as taking the next step before they kind of satisfied where they were. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Well, but you need to clarify a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's got their eye on the next ball, and not everybody, but a lot of people. And I don't know if that's unique to Montgomery County, Maryland, by the way. I think it's kind of the nature of certain things now, and it concerns me a bit. I think that we have a lot of problems here. We have a lot of issues that need to be resolved, and we need the commitment of the leadership to stick around and solve them if they're voted in to do that.
What do you think are the most important things that need to be done?
I think that we need to figure out, and I don't know the answer to this one, so I don't want this to sound judgy. We need to figure out how to manage a 160,000 student school system. It's a big undertaking, and there are a lot of challenges all around it. And I think that we are probably doing good, but we probably can do better as a community. And I don't know, again, I don't know that answer. That's a challenging one.
But do you have a sense of the cause?
I don't know the cause. I mean, I think, it's like almost like, and look, I know that everything got turned upside down during the pandemic, and like the recovery of the pandemic, we're in it. And there's so many issues that these young people have to face now that I don't ever remember having the same level of anxiety or stress or all of these things built around that these students have now that you read about every day. And it's so maddening and saddening at the same time. It's just like, oh my goodness, and I know a lot of students lost a lot of skill in the pandemic, and the challenge of not being there and dealing with all the things that we were forced to deal with as a community, are circumstantial. So I don't know, it's a big machine, it's a big operation. It's a $3.5 billion, monster.
How do you feel about Montgomery County in terms of business friendliness?
We do business in a lot of different jurisdictions in my real estate business. We have properties, in a handful of states, and inside some of those states, different counties or jurisdictions. And Montgomery County is challenging. It's challenging. There's an overture of sort of like developers are just bad, and that we are takers and not providers.
But that is peculiar to Montgomery County, I think.
I don't want to say exclusively, but I think that from a planning and jurisdictional standpoint, it could be more challenging here than in other places. But I'll go back to my South Silver Spring thing for a minute. Is that we expended years and years of our lives, millions of dollars of loan guarantees to build. We converted what was then called the Gramex building. We kept the name. The Gramex building was owned by the government. It was owned by a private landlord, and NOAA, the Weather Service, they were the tenant for a long time, and they had vacated it 20 years earlier. It sat vacant for 20 years. It used to have a heliport on the top.
Wow.
It was pretty cool. And they wouldn't let us keep it because the FAA and all that stuff. But so my point is that if we didn't do that, if the private sector didn't do that, and it was an eyesore, and it really defined the landscape of South Silver Spring because it was the only high rise there then for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so, look, in that case, we had a very willing administration. They were very supportive, and I'm sure this administration would have been the same way, because it was but those are important relationships to have to the community. And what we did in exchange, we voluntarily did the affordability, and the county did support us, by the way, financially. I want to put that out. There was, housing initiative funds that were tied into this deal.
How much money did you get from the county?
$4 million. And we paid them back early.
What do you think are the cross impacts of these two businesses that we just, the media business and this other business what are the cross impacts?
Well, I mean, look, a lot of my reporters have a hard time living in Montgomery County. We really encourage them to be in the county because it's an important part of their job, and they all have figured it out thus far, but it's really expensive. And I know that, I own both affordable and non-affordable. So I am very aware of what rent is. And I understand someone could say, well, then just lower your rent. You're a landlord, let them live in your building for whatever. But they have to understand that, insurance has gone up by 20% this year across the board for commercial properties, maybe more. Taxes are going up. So the county is certainly raising taxes. And I understand the relationship to schools and so on and so forth, and other fees, but taxes. And then the relationship, there's a direct relationship to this naturally occurring affordable housing when a landlord is forced to pay more taxes. We have one of the most liberal court systems in the country in Montgomery County as far as landlord tenant is concerned. We have had several residents in our properties that have lived for free we finally were able to, get a judgment against one of our residents in one of our properties. The rent was about $1,000 or $1,200 a month. They owed us over $45,000.
This is in Montgomery County?
Yes.
Wow.
And so no one pays that. We absorb that. So this tenant, this resident, worked through the system, kept getting delays and delays and delays for us to get our judgment and finally an eviction, which is a painful process for everybody. I get it. I understand it. But to ignore that's a cost of a landlord is naive. And when you multiply that by the number of times that I've had to do that, maybe not to that level, but if you don't have the support to have the whole cycle work, it really puts the crunch on what ultimately becomes affordable housing.
Right. So, how does this sort of kind of painful experience inform your ownership of a media company?
Well, so they are completely different, right? They and my motivations in both are different. And the media company I own by myself, my real estate, I'm in partnerships with my family, but with my mainly my brother and my father. But the media company for me is sort of an opportunity to build an asset for the community.
You know the Moco show. Do you know why they have such extraordinary reach and Moco 360 doesn't?
Yeah, and we're always thinking and talking and trying to figure out how we become a little bit more established. I think the models are different in that, they're not employing the editors, they're not employing the reporters. We're finding the news, they're reporting the news. We're uncovering what's going on, and and I'm not suggesting that they don't ever. But I know that we're doing 6, 7, 8, 9 stories a day that are of value to the community.
What's your big plan for Moco 360 or for Bethesda Magazine going forward?
Yeah, so our big plan is really to embrace our new brand, the Moco 360 brand, and to continue to uncover opportunities for ourselves in covering covering more for the community. It will be a slow ride for sure, but with every penny that we are able to sink back into it to get another reporter, for example, we are committed to doing that. And I think that this accountability piece and making sure that we're not in a news desert here. We are literally a stone's throw from the nation's capital, the center of democracy. And I think it's important to hold people accountable.
Scott Copeland, thank you for coming on I Hate Politics.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always great. And I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you very much.
You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with lessons from my conversation with Moco 360 owner Scott Copeland.
Come on, baby, now. Let's get together and work it out. I got a license to move. Stand next to you, soaking up that groove. Driving to the setting sun. Don't know what tomorrow will bring. Open up and keep in mind, the grass is always greener on the other side.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with Moco 360 owner and Rockville-based real estate developer Scott Copeland? It's an interesting question why local media is not seen as financially viable a proposition on its own. Why should it need a neutrality model, as Scott Copeland calls it, rather than a profitability one like other businesses? One consequence of this is the dependence of local journalism on the beneficence of business people like Scott Copeland, who make their money elsewhere and see their media operations as an effort to give back to the community. 2 large private foundations have recently announced mammoth $500 million worth of grant programs in support of local news. Maryland Matters, the superbly run state news outlet, follows a nonprofit model that uses foundation grants to do their work. But why is all this even necessary? I think it is because we just don't want to pay for local news in the same way as we want to pay for the New York Times or send money to support NPR. National and international news is worth paying for, but local news is not. We all agree that local news is important, critical even to democracy, but we just don't want to pay for it. Moco 360, like its precursor Bethesda Beat, does not generate sufficient revenue on its own to support 5 reporters, let alone 50. One reporter for every 20,000 in population that Copeland says is the gold standard. What Moco 360 does right is to manage cross-subsidy, where profits from its sister publication, Bethesda Magazine, supports the online portal, 5 reporters, and 2 editors. To be fair, this kind of cross-subsidy used to be pretty standard in newspapers in the past, which included both glossy lifestyle and sports sections, which made money, while the hard news politics sections brought the newspaper credibility. The Moco Show, the other wildly successful media outlet in Montgomery County, appears to have cracked the local media code, but with a different approach. Owner Alex Sironis, a former MCPS PE teacher, has built a low-cost but nevertheless fast-breaking news network that reaches an incredible number of people. And he has managed to generate advertising revenue by leveraging his reach quite remarkably. His primary platform is social media rather than a more expensive website. And he has a skeletal staff, some of whom do both reporting and sales work. His reporting on local businesses, especially openings and closings of restaurants and stores, is really far ahead of anyone else's. But the hard news, such as crime, crashes, and politics, for that, Sironis generally relies on recycling official reports, including the Twitter feed of Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service spokesperson Pete Beringer. Whether Moco Show's revenues are high enough to support a reporter pool, even similar to that of Moco 360, I am not sure. Moco Show also very much revolves around the personality of Alex Sironis. But the long-term sustainability of a news outlet requires institutionalization and a way forward without its founder. In building I Hate Politics, I have sought yet another route by embedding a news operation in the work of an educational institution. The biggest news bureau I know in Montgomery County is actually that of Blair High School's student newspaper, Silver Chips, which, when I asked last in 2022, had a staff of 80. That's simply a different scale of operation. Question is, can that energy be harnessed to fill the decline in local news? Admittedly, there are constraints. But which of these models are truly free of all constraints? That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, and assistant producer Daniel Gallio, with support from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the Universities of Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from DC area Southern Soul band, King Soul. Tom Clifford and Jake Flack on vocals, Mark Noon on bass, Arif Durrani on keyboards, Ben Holmes on drums, Chris Watling on the sax, Matt Ripito on the tenor sax, and Vince McCool on the trumpet. You can find them at kingsoulband.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
When everyone I didn't